Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our Brain Northwest programming today. My name is Reggie Costanzo, and I am the Director of Community Support here, and I will be moderating today's class. And we are really fortunate. We have a new instructor with us today, Dr. Whitley Grant-Goodman, which I'm going to refer to you as Dr. Whitley to keep it shorter because you have a gorgeous long name. Um, and she's coming to us today from North Carolina, and I would like to officially introduce her to you all. Dr. Whitley Grant-Goodman is a licensed therapist. She's a speaker, a researcher, and also a wellness consultant. And she's really committed to utilizing a client-centered, strength-based approach, helping people pursue meaningful goals and protecting their emotional well-being, which is super important. She earned her bachelor's degree in elementary education and master's degree in clinical mental health counseling from North Carolina Central University, and she got her doctorate in educational studies from North Carolina at Greensboro. Dr. Whitley uses a combination of her background in clinical mental health education and research to offer practical evidence-based strategies for managing goals and stress, building emotional resilience, and strengthening motivation while navigating life's transitions. And she uses compassion and a commitment to making complex concepts more accessible. I've had the privilege of interacting with Dr. Whitley uh, through a Zoom meeting and through emails, and I'm just grateful for her compassion and her passion for this whole approach to sharing information in a way that is accessible. And I'm so glad you're with us, Dr. Whitley. It's such a treat. Thank you so much. And I will I will leave it to you, and I will be monitoring and supporting with whatever is needed.
All right, thank you so much, Reggie, for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon for me because I'm over in North Carolina. So, hey, y'all, hey, little Southern twang there. So, I am going to be turning my camera off just to protect the bandwidth. But when we get back to the Q&A portion, I'll turn it back on. But I did want to hop on so y'all can see me now, so you can see, put a face to the voice that will be talking. So I don't have too many interactive pieces throughout. It's going to be like drop it in the chat. One of the exercises, yeah, just drop it in the chat. But I'm very much person who loves to give the folks I work with full autonomy over how they choose to engage. So if you want to share something in the chat, feel free to do so. If you rather just be in your more passive listening mode today, that is fine as well. So we'll get started. And so, of course, and I'm also going to minimize the thumbnail. So, Reggie, if folks are putting some stuff, some information in the chat, feel free to read it out once we get to those parts that require interaction. And so, the title of this presentation is Moving Forward, Building Meaningful Goals After Brain Injury. So, essentially, it's a three-part series. So, I'll talk to you all on the next couple of slides about just the full series and what it will look like. But we're going to spend about 30 to 40 minutes or so going through content, and I'm going to leave some time, a good amount of time at the end for you all to be able to ask any questions you might have had about information that I shared. And one great thing I love about being in the speaking space is that a lot of times there are experts in the room. So where I might be the therapist, the mental health expert, you all are the experts of your own stories and experiences, and you might have some information to share with your peers as well about how to set meaningful goals. Because that's what we're going to talk about today is just goal setting at this time in your lives and what that looks like. So I'm sure when we get to the Q&A portion, I'll be answering questions, but I'm sure there are going to be folks in this space who also might have some good information to share as far as how to set meaningful goals. All right, so another just a little headshot of me. So, like Reggie shared, I'm a mental health therapist, speaker, and consultant. And so today we're really talking about being able to empower you all with self-directed, realistic goals. So I'm going to be combining some clinical neurorehabilitation practices with real-world tools on how to set goals. And so together with Brain Northwest, I'll be guiding you through emotional, psychological, and practical growth for how goals should be set, organized, and executed. And so I love starting with a icebreaker. That's one of my favorite things that I love to do. I think icebreakers kind of just set the pace or kind of set the intention behind today. So what we're doing essentially with this goal is that we are going to, I want to kind of get an idea of how folks are feeling in the audience today. So what it's basically is like a stoplight, no stoplight, green, yellow, red, and it's asking you which one of these colors matches your energy right now. So green light is feeling alert, clear, and ready to engage actively. Yellow light is more feeling a bit foggy or slow here to listen quietly and gently. And red light, like I said, red light folks are on the pathway where you know what, my energy is running a little low today. I'm more so in my listening era. I'm not engaging too much, but being present, whether you're here actively today, listening presently, or you're watching a recording, either way, that's still a form of engagement, even if it might be more so in the red light. So if folks could just kind of type in the chat green, yellow, red, or even you can even come off mute if you rather share that way. But either way, I'd love to hear what folks are saying. Okay, so lots of yellows and greens with a touch of lavender. Okay, we love a twist. Okay, 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 green, green, green. Okay. And you know, oh, yellow, red. Okay, so like in the middle. Okay. And that's interesting too. And it's probably more greens and yellows because again, it's morning for you all. Whereas for me, I'm probably more of like a yellow. It's like I said, 2 o'clock over here, and I'll be winding down my day shortly in a couple hours. I'm more so like a yellow, slowing down for the day. So that makes sense. So again, I love all levels of energy. I do not feel, I feel that I want to give you all full autonomy over how you feel today, and I'm definitely excited about just learning more about you all and how you are going to apply your goals. So thank you for engaging in that activity. All right. And so next, I love to, one thing as a therapist, as I'm doing my presentations, one of the things I like to do is kind of just want to be able to create safety for you all. So even though we're together today for about an hour, still understanding that you need to take breaks, feel free to do so. Some of you all might have your camera on now, but feel free to turn your camera off, step away, stretch, close your eyes, rest whenever your brain needs a pause. And that's the great thing about having this recorded is so that if you miss something live in the moment, you'll be able to listen to it at a later time. And then if also, screen fatigue is definitely a real thing, or there's a headache coming on, so that might be a great time to take a pause and a break. The second thing is just re-emphasizing what I shared previously is that participate as much or as little as feels comfortable. So I know I have some greens and yellows in the chat, but greens don't feel, people who have the green mode do not feel the pressure to answer all the things. Listening and absorbing is 100% valid, and that is perfectly fine. And then lastly, like I said, we're going to have some gentle pacing, about 30 to 45 minutes of content, and with a good amount of time for Q&A towards the end so that any questions that you all have or advice you want to share, you will have the space and autonomy to do so. So I want to re-emphasize what the three-part series looks like. So today, what we're going to be focusing on is redefining what our goals look like post-injury. I'm going to talk to you all about the concept of neuroplasticity, talk about brain energy, and breaking big dreams into tiny 1% micro steps. Secondly, our next session will be on September 8th. That's so it's about 4 weeks out. And with that session, we're going to be talking about what to do with fatigue spikes, memory slips occur, or emotional frustration sets in. So, what does that look like? How do we adjust our goals without feeling like we have to completely abandon them? And then session three, which will be on October 13th, is celebrating the progress and momentum. So I think the great thing about this series and the way we have set it up is we have about 8 weeks. So we can set goals for today. And then the session two is kind of like a mid check-in, a midpoint check-in to see what progress do we need to make any adjustments. And then session three, we'll be talking about some achievements, like what do these goals look like and how do we apply this concept moving forward. So let's dive in. So, the first thing I want to talk to you all about is this idea of reframing. So, being able to reframe is a skill set in itself, is when you're taking something that is more so impacting you negatively, like maybe a negative cognition or a negative thought, and being able to reframe it into a more positive, digestible thought so that can help you. It just helps with this having a overall positive cognition and thoughts just help you overall physiologically as well. So when we think about what this pre-injury mindset looks like, so what things might have looked like before a brain injury occurred, it talks about focusing on high speed, volume, multitasking. And I even feel like multitasking in itself could really be a myth. It's hard to do multiple things at one time. It's better to concentrate and execute one thing at a time versus trying to do so much. So in the past or previously, society might set up this idea that we need to push through to exhaustion. So society will tell us more is better, push harder, go stronger, go harder. And then previously, your goals might have looked like measures were strictly by productivity output. And it really ignores those internal cognitive fatigue signals. So we definitely, again, we always hear messaging from a society standpoint about just pushing through no matter what's going on. If you're sick, still go to work. Like you get these messages all of the time. So naturally, once you experience brain injury, it might not, you might think to yourself, oh, well, I need to return to who I was previously because this was a mindset. However, we know that in terms of reframing, it looks like how do I do things differently with who I am now? So when you're thinking about brain injury, aware mindset, you want to focus on quality, alignment, and meaningful values. Meaningful values. It honors cognitive energy limits and recovery needs. And then it celebrates tiny, consistent micro steps. There's this book that is really popular in terms of micro steps. And I think the great thing about being able to digest literature now is there are multiple ways to do so. Whether you're reading visually, you can also do audio books, slow down the language. And it talks about just having these smaller, very small, consistent steps to lead to what your overall or overarching bigger goals are. So it does, and so the intention is really to completely shift the rules. So success is no longer about how much you can accomplish in a day. Success is about alignment with your values and really honoring those energy limits. All right. So when we think about the emotional landscape after injury, so goal setting after brain injury just isn't just a organizational challenge, it's an emotional and psychological journey. So here's what it looks like. So what it looks like you might grieve old habits, right? So previously it might have been easy to complete certain tasks, and now it might take longer to do those same tasks. So we do need to recognize that grief is something that can be applied to multiple different things, right? A lot of times when folks we hear the word grief, our mind automatically goes as to someone passing, and it's not necessarily always assigned to situations, but we can also grieve the life we thought we might have lived. We can grieve opportunities we thought might have taken place. We can even grieve the future, something that hasn't even happened yet, because we know we might have to do things differently. So it's really able to validate and recognize that grief is very much a real thing. And again, this is why events like this or webinars like this are so important, because it really talks about how do I adjust now and acknowledge the grief that I've experienced, and now what are some actions that I can take to align with who I am now. And so it's completely normal to feel grief for your old routine or to miss how easy tasks used to feel. And so the second thing a lot of folks, when it comes to an acceptance piece, is realizing the frustration with memory that can come up. So you might be forgetting steps or goals midway, and so when you try to start a goal and hit a wall, it's easy to blame yourself or feel like you've lost your drive. But struggling with initiation or memory is a physical symptom of the injury. It is not a character flaw. So again, it's like first the grief, and then there's some acceptance that's necessary in understanding that it is not a character flaw or any reflection of who you are as a person. And then the last thing is the identity shift. So, learning who you are in this current chapter of your life and recognizing this allows us to stop fighting ourselves and to start working with our brains as it heals. So, again, I really want to emphasize the identity shift. I work with lots of folks who we talk about just how things in life looks different, and learning to have some acceptance over who you are currently. And I think it's people might not always, this is why I'm really um am so fortunate to be attached to this program, is because this company and this program is because I'm sure there's opportunity and space for you all to be able to hold space for the grieving component, because a lot of times folks may not give you the opportunity to do that. But I think it is important to acknowledge again the grief that you might be experiencing from this changing in how tasks might feel. So that's important to validate and honor that, but not staying there, not staying there mentally, being able to say, okay, I'm acknowledging the grief that's coming up from these old habits and how I had to do things differently. But even showing up today, here in person, or listening to the recording, you are taking those steps to figure out, okay, what does the identity shift look like now moving forward? So, in terms of why initiation feels so hard. So, when we think about initiation, it's like getting us going. What does that look like? So, the things that I want you all to focus on here is executive function and neuro fatigue cards. So, we're looking at the neurological reason behind getting started as difficulties. So, when it comes to executive functioning and what executive function is, executive functioning is like our brain's air traffic controller. So it manages, it's our frontal lobe acting as our brain's air traffic controller, and it manages all of our executive functioning. So executive functioning is task initiation, planning, sequencing and switching roles. So before an injury takes place, starting a simple task like cleaning a desk or opening a book automatically. Those things tend to happen or seem to be pretty simple or easy. Now, because our um frontal lobes or our air traffic control, things are differently. Now it has been disrupted. So things that were automatically easier now in terms of the neuro fatigue causes more effort. So when we think about Post-injury, those automatic pathways are now disrupted. So your brain has to manually calculate every single step, and what used to take 5% of your mental battery now might take 50%. And so this is why your neural fatigue, you might experience neural fatigue before you even start the task. And again, just want to emphasize this part about it's not lazy, it's not a character flaw, it's a neurological symptom of injury, and it's not a lack of, not a personal flaw or a lack of willpower. Okay, so I have another exercise for us. And again, if you don't want to drop in the chat, you can also share during the Q&A, but I definitely love to put in the chat if you want to. Or I know Reggie was saying take notes, you can jot down one word. But I really want to pause here and help you all think about your values. So instead of asking yourself when it comes to goals, instead of asking, what should I accomplish? I want you to ask yourself, what's one small activities that brings me joy, peace, or independence right now? So it could be sitting outside in the garden. It could be reading a simple page of a book. It could be making a warm cup of tea independently. So again, if you don't want to share these, that's okay. But if you do, that's great too. So you can write it down and refer back to it later. You can share it in chat for some of us to look over, or you can just reflect quietly on what that activity might be. All right, so I'm going to take a look at the chat and see what folks listed. So let's see. Okay, we have driving, exercise, soaking up sunshine, planting things in the garden, making someone smile or laugh, walking dog in the woods, knitting. Okay, in the garden, right? Multiple activities. Workout, walk, arc. Okay, sit in a chair outside in the shade. So some folks outside, some folks laughing or making others laugh can be thing. Okay, and talks with your son. Uh-huh. And I love that what you're sharing, the length of the chat depends on the cognitive energy. So in some ways, you're applying the concept that we're talking about today, where we're setting a goal, but we're making micro steps to be able to achieve those goals. And sunshine, barefoot on a sandy beach. Okay, okay. Thank you all for sharing. All right. And so when it comes to neuroplasticity and micro steps, um, so this is what this describes is just like 1%. So it's talking about small actions that can rewire our neural pathways. So your brain retains neuroplasticity, which is the ability to form new neural connections through recovery. So large goals overpower damaged pathways. So again, it's better to take these tiny 1% micro steps gently to build new highways without overwhelming your nervous system. So your brain retains neuroplasticity, the ability to form new neural connections throughout your entire life. So it's essentially it's your brain's ability to change and adapt in response to experiences, learnings, and practice. And after a brain injury, the brain may have to find a different way to accomplish things that used to happen more automatically. And so this is one reason why practice matters. When we repeatedly practice a skill or a behavior, we're giving the brain opportunities to strengthen the pathways involved in that activity. And then when we try to tackle big complex goals, Like I said, we overpower neural pathways, triggering overwhelm and shutdown. So even the goal, some of the things that you all listed here, we would even, as we think about our SMART goals, which I'll talk to you all about on the next slide, we're going to say, how do we take these larger things and break them down to small, achievable, bite-sized goals that will prevent ourselves from becoming overwhelming. So I have this information over here on the right side of the slide. And basically, it's just giving you an example to describe what I'm talking about. So, for example, a big goal might look like trying to clear the whole forest in one afternoon, while a micro goal might say, how do I walk one small path daily until a clear trail naturally forms? So instead of you think of it like a dense forest. So trying to clear a giant 10-mile roll at once is exhausting, but walking one tiny, consistent 1% path daily gently creates a clear trail without draining your energy, your battery. So that makes me even think about the person who shared walking in the woods with their dog. So that might be an example of taking smaller steps each day or maybe each week to get to um, that overall goal. And so next, I want to talk to you all about SMART goals. I'm not sure if you all have heard of SMART goals before or not, but SMART goals are really just ways to break down goals that we have set for ourselves. So it really puts actions to the goals. So when you think about SMART goals, the traditional SMART goals can feel very rigid. So now we think about how do we adapt this very rigid thought process to someone who has experienced a brain injury. So the first thing is taking one tiny physical action. So focusing on one tiny physical action. So I saw someone in the chat said to laugh or make someone laugh. So we might focus on one small physical action and then thinking about, okay, how do we keep it simple? Did I do it or not? So SMART goals, when the SMART goals I've done in the past, I might have a folks complete a complex worksheet. But now if we're adapting it, we're taking it down some and making it much easier to measure and track. And in terms of adaptability, just like this stoplight exercise this stoplight question that I shared with you all, I think that might be a good tool in itself to just apply to your everyday life. Like you can kind of assess yourself throughout the day to say, hey, am I feeling like I'm in a red light right now, or am I feeling green and go? And on those green days, you might be able to make more progress towards the goals that we're talking about. Whereas red days, this might be a day to rest and give pause, or realizing that I'm in the middle of a goal but now I'm feeling more towards red. So being flexible for those days where the energy is not where and not particularly high, might be on the lower end. And then thinking about relevant in terms of goal is it must connect to something you actually enjoy. So that's why I love all the activities that you all dropped in the chat, is because it sounds like these are things that bring joy, help to establish independency, and that's how it helps with the relevance component. And then in terms of time and gentle, remove the rigid timers. So again, SMART goals and previously for you might have felt like I'm gonna lose. I don't. I'll just do weight loss. I feel like people are always saying weight loss goals. But I'm gonna lose 50 pounds in 2026, right? So not putting these strict deadlines on what goals might look like, because deadlines and timers can trigger panic. Remember, we were talking about the idea of neuroplasticity and how it looks like not putting pressures on ourselves to have these huge goals with these very strict and rigid deadlines. It can cause unnecessary levels of stress. So making these less rigid and easier and much more digestible. And so when it comes to being able to shrink the goal, and so for this one, again, you all can put it in the chat if you want to, or you can hold on to it and save it for later. So the idea of this particular activity is being able to shrink goals that we might have set in the past that were not necessarily too big, because even previously, a lot of times people just set goals that are so large and they don't really list the steps, smaller steps or micro steps that we're talking about to get to that place. So, for example, if we're talking about shrinking the goal, I want you all to think of a goal. So, the example I have listed here is someone saying, okay, I want to read books again. That's the goal. So, when you're saying I want to read books, too big of a goal might look like I'm going to read one chapter every night, right? So that can trigger cognitive fatigue, that can cause eye strain. So something better or a better way to take that same goal is to say, I might read 2 pages while I'm having tea or coffee or water or juice, something, whatever your beverage of choice is, but it's better, but it still can be heavy on those foggy days. Like we talked about, on those red days, it still can be on the heavier side. But a micro goal winner could look like opening a book and reading one paragraph. And the reason why the micro goals or shrinking the goals are so helpful because it can almost, and it's not like you're tricking your mind because you're accomplishing it, but it's saying, you know what, I'm going to make these goals ones in which there's not a lot of barrier. It's going to cause momentum because now I'm being able to track, hey, I said I was going to read one paragraph on Monday. Wednesday, I read another paragraph. Friday, I read another paragraph. Then Sunday, I say, oh, I read maybe a page, right? So that's why these digestible micro goals are so important because it really helps us to think about how do we create these smaller steps to really help us mentally feel like we are accomplishing, like we are recovering. And so why is one paragraph a winner? Right? It might not seem like a lot, but it eliminates the barrier to starting. If you read one paragraph and feel tired, you win. If you feel good and read another page, that's the bonus momentum that you might not have even considered. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you all for sharing. You all for sharing. Okay. All right. And so one of the things I love with my clients that I work with, I love using like metaphors or analogies and examples of how we should perceive our energy. So when we think about our energy levels, much like the stoplight exercise, it's almost like an energy banking and pacing. So when you think about your energy approach and how you're approaching things, you want to think about this idea of red crash versus green green pacing, excuse me. So this particular slide is one of the most important takeaways from today's session. So many survivors live in this push and crash cycle. So you have a good day, you feel great, you do 5 hours of chores, and then you crash in bed for a couple days straight. So when I talk about push and crash, it means that you're pushing yourself. You're using that older thought process where I need to push through my goals. I need to work through my goals for myself. And then what ends up happening is that there's some crashing that happens at the end. And so again, when we talk about being able to help our cognitive energy, we're going to reframe that. We're not going to just keep pushing through on goals and causing this crashing cycle. Instead, cognitive banking means stopping for your activity when you are at 7% energy capacity before you feel exhausted, right? So just like the last example where it talked about, I'm going to say, hey, instead of saying I want to get back into reading, that's the overarching goal, but I'm going to break it down so micro where I say, hey, I'm going to read a paragraph today. And so I can do that paragraph and then you can test and say, hey, I feel good after that paragraph. Maybe I'll read another one. So again, that's just this idea of pacing and banking is to take goals and make them very much more digestible. It really helps with the cognition and feeling accomplished and really letting go of that old mindset of I need to push through even when I'm not feeling my best. So, one of the things I talk to a lot of my clients about is this idea of rest as active recovery. Rest as active recovery. So rest is not slacking off and it's not giving up. It's an active neurological therapy. So it gives our brains time to reset. And again, I feel like I don't know if it was a maybe a post-COVID thing or maybe I'm just hyper focused on it because of me being in a therapeutic space, but I feel like people are paying more attention to these idea of resting as a form of recovery because in the past we might have felt like we had to earn rest. Like, oh, I can't take a break until I've done these 1,000 things on a to-do list. But thinking about rest as a form of recovery, you know that rest is just as important as some of these goals that we have listed. So going back to this idea of reframing rest as active therapy rather than passive slacking. And so being able to really reframe how we look at rest in general. So it's not giving up. It's not being lazy. And so, what that might look like in terms of taking intentional rest breaks is schedule brain rest. So, 10 to 15 minutes in dark room, quiet time. Mhm. So, just like athletes rest their muscles after a workout, your brain needs scheduled downtime to synthesize information and repair tissue. Right? Your brain is a muscle in itself. So naturally it needs ideas of rest. Yes, rest of a form of recovery and resistance. Absolutely, absolutely. And so when you incorporate this idea of cognitive rest into your day, 10 to 15 minutes in a dark crime room with zero screens, especially in this day and age when we're screen heavy. I know we use a screen now, so this might be a good time when we wrapped up today to maybe take this 10 utilize one of these 10 to 15 dark room exercises could be good. No, not a lot of background audio or zero stimulation. And a lot of you all talked about being outside and how that was important. So even sitting outside and just maybe paying attention to how the like the air and different things feel on your body can also be a form of rest. So thank you for sharing that part about rest as a form of recovery and resistance. All right. So in terms of environmental cues and external memory aids. So let's say, what does that look like? So again, thinking about what are some practical tools that can assist us? So first is visual anchors. Right. So being able to place objects where you can see them. Shoes by the door. A lot of you all stated outside, right? So we know one of the things that we need to go outside, I guess depending upon where you live, right? And what your outside looks like. But it might be shoes. You might need to put shoes by the door. You might need to put book on the pillow, water bottle on desk. If the goal is to might even be let me drink more water. And so doing these visual anchors can help you not waste energy trying to memorize your task list. So offload that work onto your environment with the visual anchors. The second thing can be whiteboards and sticky notes. Whiteboards and sticky notes. So you keep a single daily focal board in a central area like the kitchen. Might even put it on I don't know, the refrigerator, and being able to say, okay, what are these single tasks that I want to focus on that can help me with my goals? And then the last thing would be gentle timers. So using soft chimes or phone alarms labeled with action steps. So it might be I don't know, 11:45, drink water. 11:50 stretch, right? So just again, setting these different environmental cues and different things that you can just incorporate in your environment to help you with the goals that you all are going to create. And so when we think about those high fatigue and hard days, so again, we've already talked about the visual focus, right? Those self-compassion cards, those type of reminders. So the first thing I want you to give yourself permission for pause. So halting a goal on a high symptom day is smart self-management. So it's like what happens when you wake up and your brain is in that red light zone that we talked about. So on a high fatigue day, you're giving yourself permission to pause. You're saying, you know what? I might make again those micro goals like the one paragraph might be example of how do I take these goals down? How do I adjust them? So if your goals were, let's say, a 5-minute walk, you want to scale it down to say, I'll open the window for 30 seconds. Whereas at first I wanted to take a 5-minute goal, 5-minute walk outside. Now I'm going to take the goal down some. I'm going to adjust because how I'm feeling today. So I might do that for 30 seconds. And then really being able to remember that, just like this quote says, consistency is not doing the exact same amount every day. Consistency is returning to your intention with gentleness. So again, that self-compassion, that's what self-care is in itself. It's really being having the same compassion you might extend to others, being able to extend to yourself as well. And so we just have a couple of more slides until we get to our Q&A section. All right. So I want to know from you all, what are what is one comfort item or easy activity for you on a low energy day? So, some examples I have are listening to calm music, wrapping yourself in a heavy blanket. A heavy blanket is always good one. I don't know if you all have heard of those weighted blankets, but they tend to help with like anxiety and overwhelm. You could watch a favorite show, sitting by the window, or have a safe rest spot in your home. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, woodwork, P. John. Okay, taking a nap with dogs. Okay, watching TV, going dancing. Yes, 5-minute YouTube. Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah. And it's nothing wrong with rewatching an old show. That is a great technique, especially when you already know what the mood is going to be, even if you already seen it. Let me turn on my favorite show that I've watched plenty of times and rewatch that episode because I already know how it's going to make me feel when I watch it. And so with this slide, it's a 4-week action blueprint. So again, this is going to be your action plan or your script or your gentle roadmap. We're going to reframe a gentle roadmap for the next 4 weeks as we go into when it's part two. So the first thing you're going to do is identify one small personal value or activity that brings you joy. The second thing you're going to do is shrink that activity down into 1% micro step. And when I say under one micro, I mean it takes under 3 minutes to perform. The third thing is to add a visual anchor. So we've talked about what those look like. A sticky note that you put on your fridge, put in your shoes by the door. So being able to add that visual anchor. And the last thing is practicing stopping at 70% energy and celebrating every micro victory. So it's like 70%, back in school, that was like what, a passing score. So we're trying to pass. We don't have to be um get the A, B honor roll, all those things. We want to have small micro steps because the goals, the intention behind goals is to add to our self-care, to increase our overall wellness. So we don't want the goals to be cause so much exertion that they're serving the opposite purpose. And again, you'll have this to refer back to in the recording. But I want you all to That'll be your homework between now and then is to thinking about the values. How do you shrink it to 1%? Add in a visual anchor and then to practice the pacing because we're moving away from this idea of pushing through. All right. So some key takeaways I want you all to remember before we go into our Q&A is small actions lead to real neural rewiring. Pacing prevents that dreaded push and crash cycle. Like I said, doing I'm gonna do 5 hours of chores and then boom, because you exerted yourself so much, now they have to spend days recovering. And we know rest is resistance, rest is necessary, but sometimes if our rest, we have a lot of rest, it might be because we overexerted ourselves before. And then lastly, being able to offload memory using a whiteboard, alarms on our phone, post-it note. A lot of folks are getting the post-it notes in their bathroom mirrors or on the refrigerator. Like I said, places that you're probably going to go in your home every day, probably in the bathroom, probably in the kitchen. So putting these visual reminders around to help you um, to be able to remember some of those goals that you set for yourself. And then lastly, remember we're reframing, we're challenging our old thought process of goal setting. Your worth is not tied to the productivity output. So where the main goal again might be reading the whole book, those small bite-sized goals. If I'm going to read a paragraph today, that is a 1% progress towards your goal, and that is great. It's not tied to how much you output. And so rest is an active, essential part of brain healing. So it goes in there with the same as these setting goals. Rest might honestly resting more or resting, a certain forms of intentional rest, that might be part of your goals. And then you're doing better than you think. So again, that reframing component. All right. And so now I am going to open us up for Q&A. So feel free to put in unmute, type in the chat, or any questions that you were holding on to, or like I said, thoughts, because I this is why I love doing these presentations, because there's always someone in the audience who can give some additional context on some successful ways that they've done some micro goal setting. So if you have that advice, please share um, um, out loud or in the chat. Um, or just take notes, relax, and listen. And then our second session again will be on September the 8th. I think that was the day, yeah, September 8th. And it'll be talking about navigating obstacles, memory, and fatigue.